Have you ever wondered why humans don't have tails? It may seem like an odd question. After all, no one alive today has ever needed one, but millions of years ago, the ancestors of every human being on Earth had tails. In fact, if you could travel far enough back in time, you would find that a tail wasn't unusual. It was essential for survival. So what happened? Why do monkeys still have tails while humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans do not? Did evolution simply erase them? Or was losing our tails one of the most important changes that eventually made us human? The answer is hidden in a story that stretches back more than 25 million years. It is a story written not only in ancient fossils, but also inside your own DNA. Even more surprising, the evidence suggests that the genes responsible for removing our tails are still with us today. And sometimes, they still reveal themselves. Every year, a small number of babies are born with what appears to be a tiny tail. These rare cases remind scientists that our evolutionary history has never truly disappeared. It has simply been rewritten over millions of years. But before we can understand why humans lost their tails, we first need to understand why our ancestors had them in the first place. Imagine standing in a tropical forest around 30 million years ago. The world looks very different from today. Vast forests cover much of the landscape. Towering trees form thick green canopies, and life exists almost entirely above the ground. Predators wait below. Food hangs high in the branches. Survival depends on climbing, balancing, and moving quickly through the trees. For many early mammals, a tail is more than just an extra body part. It acts as a counterbalance while leaping between branches. It helps maintain stability while running along narrow limbs. In some species, it even wraps around branches, functioning almost like an extra hand. Without a tail, many tree-dwelling animals would struggle to survive. This is why tails became one of evolution's most useful inventions. Long before humans existed, our distant mammalian ancestors relied on them every single day, but evolution never keeps a feature simply because it once worked. When environments change, when behavior changes, and when survival demands new abilities, nature begins to rewrite the body. Millions of years later, one remarkable group of primates began living in a different way. Instead of depending on long balancing tails, they developed stronger shoulders, more flexible backs, and an entirely new style of climbing. At first, this change seemed small, but over countless generations, it would permanently reshape the future of our species. The disappearance of the tail was not a mistake. It was the beginning of a transformation that would eventually lead to apes, and much later, to us. To understand why humans lost their tails, we must first travel back to a world where nearly every primate had one. Around 55 million years ago, shortly after the extinction of the dinosaurs, the ancestors of today's primates began spreading through warm tropical forests. These early creatures were small, agile, and spent almost their entire lives in the trees. Life in the forest canopy was dangerous. One wrong step could mean a fatal fall. Predators waited below while food was scattered across thousands of branches above. Every movement had to be perfect. This is where the tail became one of evolution's greatest tools. For many early primates, a tail acted like a balancing pole. As they sprinted across the narrow branches or leaped through the forest, it shifted their center of gravity, helping them stay stable. The faster they moved, the more valuable that tail became. Some modern monkeys still use their tails in exactly this way. In species such as spider monkeys, the tail is so powerful that it can grip branches and even support the animal's entire body weight. Scientists call this a prehensile tail, and it functions almost like a fifth limb. But not every tail could grasp objects. Many species simply used it for balance, communication, or to help make quick turns while climbing. The important point is this. For millions of years, a tail provided a clear survival advantage. Natural selection rewarded animals that could move safely through the trees, avoid predators, and reach food more efficiently. Generation after generation, tails remained an essential part of primate life, but evolution never stands still. As climates changed and forests shifted, some primates began adapting in unexpected ways. Instead of racing along thin branches like many monkeys, a new group evolved a different strategy. They climbed more slowly. They used powerful arms to pull themselves upward. Their shoulders became more flexible. Their chests grew broader. Rather than depending on speed and balance, they relied on strength and control. This new style of movement changed everything. A long tail was no longer providing the same advantage it once had. In fact, it may have become unnecessary. Over countless generations, as these early apes continued adapting to their environment, the body began changing in subtle ways. Bones shifted, muscles adapted, the spine evolved, and eventually one feature that had been useful for tens of millions of years quietly disappeared. But this wasn't because evolution had a goal. Evolution doesn't plan ahead. It simply favors traits that help a species survive and reproduce in its current environment. If a structure stops providing a meaningful advantage, and if losing it doesn't reduce survival, it can gradually fade away over many generations. That appears to be exactly what happened with the tail. Yet one mystery remains: how could an entire body part vanish? What changed inside the DNA of our ancient ancestors that made tails stop growing altogether? The answer wasn't hidden in fossils. It was hidden inside the genetic code itself. For decades, scientists believed they understood when humans lost their tails, but they still couldn't explain how it happened. Fossils could show that ancient apes no longer had tails, yet fossils cannot preserve DNA. The real answer remained hidden inside the cells of living animals. Then modern genetics opened a new window into our evolutionary past. By comparing the DNA of humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, monkeys, and other mammals, researchers noticed something remarkable. Although humans no longer have tails, we still carry many of the same genes involved in building one. One gene attracted particular attention. It is called TBXT, sometimes known as the brachyury gene. During early embryo development, this gene helps shape the spine and the tail region. In tailed animals, it plays an important role in allowing the tail to develop normally. But scientists discovered that humans and the other great apes share a unique genetic change in this region that monkeys do not. This wasn't the loss of the entire gene. Instead, it was a small change in how the gene is regulated, a tiny alteration that affected the instructions used during early development. At first glance, such a small mutation might seem insignificant, but evolution often works through small changes with enormous consequences. During the earliest weeks of development, every embryo follows a surprisingly similar blueprint. Human embryos even form a short tail-like structure before birth. As development continues, that structure is gradually absorbed into the growing body. The remaining bones fuse together to form the coccyx, or tailbone. If you place your hand at the base of your spine, you can actually feel the last visible reminder of a tail your distant ancestors once possessed. Although it no longer extends outside the body, it still serves as an attachment point for muscles, tendons, and ligaments that support the pelvic floor. In other words, our tail didn't completely disappear, it became something new. To test whether the genetic change truly mattered, researchers created experimental mice carrying a similar mutation in the TBXT gene. The results were striking. Some mice were born with much shorter tails, while others had no visible tail at all. These experiments suggested that relatively small genetic changes could dramatically influence tail development. However, scientists are careful not to claim that a single mutation tells the whole story. Evolution is rarely that simple. The disappearance of the human tail was almost certainly the result of multiple genetic changes working together over millions of years, combined with natural selection and changing patterns of movement. The TBXT discovery is one important piece of the puzzle, not the entire puzzle. Even so, it helps explain one of evolution's most fascinating transformations. A tiny change in our DNA may have helped reshape the body of every great ape alive today. But this raises an even bigger question. If tails were so useful, why didn't evolution keep them? Could losing them have provided an advantage that outweighed everything they once offered? At first, losing a tail sounds like a disadvantage. After all, tails help animals balance, communicate, and move through difficult environments. So why would evolution allow such a useful feature to disappear? The answer lies in a major shift in how our ancient ancestors lived. Around 25 million years ago, the ancestors of today's great apes began moving through forests in a different way than most monkeys. Instead of running quickly along narrow branches, they relied on powerful arms and flexible shoulder joints. They climbed vertically, hung beneath branches, and carefully pulled themselves through the canopy. This style of movement is known as suspensory locomotion. When an animal hangs beneath branches, a long tail becomes far less important for balance. Stability now comes from the arms, shoulders, chest, and core muscles rather than from a counterbalancing tail. Over countless generations, the body adapted to this new lifestyle. The shoulders became more mobile, the rib cage grew broader, the spine changed shape, and the muscles that supported the upper body became stronger. As these changes accumulated, the tail provided fewer benefits than it once had. In evolution, a body part doesn't have to become harmful to disappear. It simply has to stop offering a meaningful advantage. Imagine carrying a heavy tool every day that you never use. Over many generations, if that tool no longer helps survival, natural selection may stop preserving it. The same principle applies to anatomy. If individuals without long tails survive just as well, or even slightly better, the genes responsible for shorter tails could gradually spread through the population. Eventually, tails disappeared from the ancestors of all living great apes, but their bodies continued changing. Millions of years later, some of our ancestors began spending more time on the ground. Walking upright placed entirely new demands on the skeleton. The pelvis became shorter and stronger. The spine developed its distinctive S-shaped curve. Powerful muscles attached around the lower back and hips helped support the body's weight during standing and walking. Without a long tail extending behind the body, balance was controlled in different ways. The legs, hips, spine, and inner ear worked together to keep the body stable. While losing the tail did not directly create human bipedalism, it removed a structure that was no longer essential and fit naturally into a body that was evolving for a very different style of movement. This is one of the most important lessons in evolution. Nature doesn't build the perfect body. It builds a body that works well enough for its current environment. Sometimes that means gaining new features, sometimes it means modifying old ones, and sometimes it means letting go of something that was once essential. But one final mystery remains. If humans truly lost their tails millions of years ago, why are a few babies still born with tail-like structures today? Could these rare births reveal hidden clues about our evolutionary past? Even though humans lost their tails millions of years ago, evolution occasionally leaves behind fascinating reminders of our past. In extremely rare cases, babies are born with a small tail-like structure near the base of the spine. At first glance, it may seem as though evolution has somehow reversed itself. But is that really what's happening? The answer is more complicated and far more interesting. Doctors generally classify these cases into two categories. The first is known as a true human tail. These rare structures are usually made of soft tissue, including skin, fat, connective tissue, blood vessels, and sometimes muscle. They do not contain vertebrae like the tails of monkeys or many other mammals, and they cannot function as balancing organs. The second category is called a pseudo-tail or false tail. These are not actual tails at all. Instead, they are caused by underlying developmental conditions involving the spine or nearby tissues. Although they may look similar from the outside, their origin is completely different. These rare cases do not mean that humans are evolving tails again. Instead, they remind us that the instructions used to build a tail during early development have not completely disappeared. Over millions of years, evolution modified those instructions rather than erasing them entirely. In fact, every human embryo briefly develops a tiny tail during the early weeks of pregnancy. As development continues, that temporary structure is gradually reabsorbed into the body. The remaining vertebrae fuse together to form the coccyx, the tailbone that every healthy human still carries today. Your tail never truly vanished. It simply became part of your spine. This small bone continues to serve an important purpose by anchoring muscles and ligaments that support posture, movement, and the pelvic floor. So while the visible tail is gone, its legacy remains inside every one of us, and that may be the most remarkable part of this story. Human evolution was never about becoming better than other animals. Monkeys still have tails because tails continue to help them survive in their environments. Great apes, including humans, followed a different evolutionary path. Neither body design is superior. Each is the result of millions of years of adaptation to different challenges. Our ancestors did not wake up one day and decide to lose their tails. Generation after generation, tiny genetic changes accumulated. Individuals best suited to their environment survived and passed those traits to their offspring. Over millions of years, those small changes reshaped the body, the skeleton, and eventually the future of an entire lineage. Today, whenever you touch the base of your spine, you're touching a silent reminder of that ancient journey. A journey that began in the trees, continued through millions of years of evolution, and ultimately led to the emergence of modern humans. The story of the missing human tail isn't just about what we lost. It's about how even the smallest changes, repeated over unimaginable lengths of time, can transform the history of life itself. If you enjoyed discovering the hidden story behind one of humanity's greatest evolutionary mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more documentary-style videos exploring the science, history, and secrets of our ancient past. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next journey into human evolution.